So I'm presenting a paper called Confidence and College Applications, Evidence from a Randomized Intervention. And this is joint work with Rustam Akimov and Camille Terrier. And at this point, we are very close to finalizing the working paper, so all your comments are highly appreciated. So what we do in this paper is that we study the impact and the relevance of confidence for college applications in France. So why do we care about this topic and why do we think it's important? So one motivation is that access to prestigious colleges is very unequal across socio-economic groups. For example, it's well documented that females often enter less highly paid fields, as for example, STEM majors. And research also shows that controlling for their academic ability and credentials, they often apply to less selective colleges. Also, along the socio-economic dimension, we see a lot of inequality. So, for example, recent work by Chetty has shown that children with parents in the top 1% of the income distribution are 77 times more likely to attend elite colleges than children with parents in the bottom 20% of the income distribution. So access to prestigious colleges differs a lot, and there have been a number of reasons put forward in the literature. One is, for example, financial constraints or information friction. So this, in particular, may explain the relevance of socioeconomic status for college admissions. But there has been less research on behavioral factors that may matter for college applications. So there's a literature on complexity and uncertainty in the admissions and aid process. Also, Tamas has contributed to this in the context of secondary education. And this may also contribute to the heterogeneity across the socioeconomic status dimension. And then there's a literature on preferences for competition, which is often used as one explanation for the gender gap in applying to prestigious colleges. But we will focus on one a different behavioral factor which can play a role here, and this is miscalibrated confidence. Here the idea is that even if you have a good chance to be admitted to a prestigious program, you may not apply because you lack the confidence. So, and how can miscalibrated confidence, or short misconfidence, play a role for college applications? So, misconfidence here in our context is kind of like both over and underconfidence. But both of these dimensions can play a role in different ways. So underconfidence can be costly for college applications because it can mean that you truncate your list from the top. So you do not include, so when you make your selection of colleges that you apply to, you may not include the most prestigious ones. And then then if you don't apply to prestigious programs, you also don't have a chance to be admitted. But also overconfidence can in principle be costly, which would mean that you truncate your list from below. And then you do not apply to sufficiently safe programs, and then you may run the risk of remaining unassigned in the end.
Sorry, are you going to explain the, I'm guessing it's a French paper, right?
Yes.
Are you going to explain the application process? Because in Hungary, there is no cost in including it in the program, so there's no sense of the confidence.
So I will go, of course, more into detail into the institutional context that we have here. But so that these costs, of course, they are amplified when you have restricted lists, which is often the case in centralized college admission systems. Also here in France, you can apply to at most 10 programs, and then you really are required to make a selection of programs where you think you have a chance to be admitted.
So you use this confidence as a concept, but is it specific to the education, or this confidence should have some more general meaning, which characterizes the personality, or if you are using in someone very straightforward, just to focusing on the education aspect.
Yes. So in our context here, we understand confidence as basically your belief about where you rank in the academic ability distribution or the GPA distribution. So we will ask students where they think they rank in the distribution of GPAs, and then the difference between your guessed rank and your true rank will be what we call miscalibrated confidence. So you can then be overconfident, you think you rank higher, or you can be underconfident when your guessed rank is lower than your true rank. But of course, this may be correlated with also like a more general idea of confidence about ability, for example. But we will focus on this kind of education-specific confidence, which is related to your rank in the relative GPA distribution. So why should miscalibrated confidence be something to be concerned about? So first, it can be problematic from an quality of opportunity perspective. For example, if female and low SES students tend to be less confident, as has been shown by previous research, then they may not apply to most prestigious programs, and then this can have consequences for their later labor market outcomes. But also from a mechanism design perspective, we think it's interesting because it can harm the stability of the final match. So because, for example, if you think about there's a female and a male, and a female student with very good grades who is less confident, but a male with not so good grades who is more confident. But then it will be only the male who is applying to a prestigious program, and then the male may get in, and then the female may have justified envy because she would have preferred the seat that the male got, but she did not apply due to a lower confidence. So and then in that sense, this is also something to be which is relevant from the mechanism design perspective. Also, policymakers have recognized in particular underconfidence as a potential concern. So here's a quote by Bouillon, who says that policymakers in France are particularly concerned about so-called self-censoring, the observation that students who underplace themselves in terms of academic ability are less likely to apply to selective institutions. So this self-censoring is kind of a French term, they call it l'auto-censure, and when you Google it, you will find lots of hits where policymakers are basically stating their concerns about that people do not apply to the most prestigious programs. Because in France, it really matters quite a lot where you go to college, because in France there's a strong hierarchy and quality of programs. You have like the grandes écoles, which are like some of the most prestigious universities in the world, and then you have the public university system, which is not so highly regarded of. For example, the French Minister of Education was quoted as saying it is time to have in our elite schools, the grandes écoles, a better representation of our society in its geographical and social diversity. Okay, so what do we do in this paper? More precisely, we have in particular 3 research questions. The first is, how large are the social and gender differences in self-confidence about relative academic ability? The second is, how much do these differences contribute to inequalities in college applications and admissions? And the third is whether a confidence correcting intervention can reduce the gender and social college admission gap. So how do we do it? We measure self-confidence of more than 2,000 French students using incentivized experiments. So we ask them about where they think they rank in the GPA distribution, and they are incentivized to provide the correct rank. But we find here that In particular, the best female and low SES students are less confident, and these are also the ones that apply to less prestigious programs. We find that this confidence, like what we how we abbreviate miscalibrated beliefs, predicts college applications. But we also find that when we correct misconfidence using our randomized intervention, then this significantly reduces the relevance of miscalibrated beliefs for college applications. And ultimately, it also reduces the gender and social college admission gap for high achieving students, who are the ones that are particularly underconfident. So briefly, the related literature that we refer here to. So the first one is, there's a long-standing literature, of course, on confidence gaps by gender in particular from the lab and the field, going back to Niederle and Westerlund. But there's also literature on that often students from lower socioeconomic status are less confident about their academic ability, even controlling for their actual academic credentials. Then there's a literature that looks at differences in educational and career choices and how this is related to confidence, both by gender and by socioeconomic status. And then ultimately there's a literature that looks at confidence and feedback in matching mechanisms. We contribute to these three strands. Okay, so first of all, the roadmap. I will shortly introduce the institutional background in France. Then I will introduce the data, and then I will show some correlational evidence that under and overconfidence matters. And then in the end, I will show the results of the randomized intervention, where we try to correct for under and overconfidence. Okay, so first the French educational system. So you go after middle school, you do high school, which is called lycée in France. And there are three different tracks. The general high school tracks that prepares for university education, the technology track and the professional track. But we will, in this paper, focus on the general high school track, which is also where the majority of students go to. And then after the lycée, you do your baccalaureate, the high school diploma in France. And with the high school diploma, you can apply to post-secondary education, which is what we will focus on. So you can apply to classe préparatoire, which is the most prestigious track. In classe préparatoire, you are prepared in 2 years to the entrance exam to the grandes écoles. And but also, if you don't make it to the grandes écoles, you can go directly to the 3rd year of public university. So there's not a huge cost of going to classe préparatoire in this sense. Yes.
Clarification question, but if you want to go to the Grand École, then the overall time you spend in higher education will be longer?
Yes, so in Grand École, it's basically a 5-year master program. But you could, in principle, also do this through the public university system. It's just that, so for example, the returns in terms of career perspective, also in terms of salary, are higher when you go to the Grand École. So in that sense, yeah, so we would say that, like, so it's usually that the best students in a high school class, they would go on to classe préparatoire and then try to get into Grand École. But the majority goes into the public university system where you can obtain license. Then there are also technical universities, technical high schools, and a couple of more higher education institutions.
So on this figure, it seems that they all get this baccalaureate, and then they can go to all the different university types. Is this the case, or the different high school types are more likely to lead to different university directions?
Yes.
And then perhaps just to follow up on my question, maybe the selection is already at the entry to a high school.
Okay, yeah. So to a certain degree, that's true. So for example, when you do like lycée professionnel, then you are very unlikely to go to class préparatoire. I mean, it's almost impossible because the bac that you obtain in high school differs by high school type. So you can the bac général is what you do in lycée général. In lycée technologique, you obtain bac technologique, for example. And then you are more likely, for example, to go to technical university or technical high school. So in that sense, it's true that there's like some selection taking place before, but I think that it's like, no, I don't want to lie, but it's like, I think like 70% or so go to lycée general. So it's the far majority actually that want to go on to study in university. They would go to lycée general, which is what we are focusing on. But it's difficult to compare students who are in lycée general to students who are in lycée technologique, for example. So that's why we exclude these students from our analysis here.
Is this a class préparatoire? Sorry, I cannot speak French at all. But this 8% option is useful if you cannot get enter to a grande contract compared to another option.
Yeah. So so we at least my understanding of the French context is that it still gives you like a good signal for example on the CV later on if you went to a class préparatoire, even if you then went on to the public university system, because this is really like regarded as kind of like the most prestigious track. So for example, when you see like CVs of professors, they would often still put like the class préparatoire, even though it's not really instrumental then later on, because what mostly matters is the Grande École or the university that they went to, but it's still a good signal if you got into a prestigious class préparatoire. So what we are focusing on is this transition from high school to post-secondary education. And given that this is France, this is a very centralized system that they have here. It's called Parcoursup. So basically all students, or yeah, almost all students after baccalaureate, they take part in Parcoursup. So in 2021, which is the year we are studying, we have more than 900,000 candidates in total, and there are more than 19,000 programs that you can apply to. But you have to decide on 10 programs. I mean, there are some exceptions in some program. If you apply to some programs, you can also do like sub wishes, but like the hard cap is for most students is at 10 programs. So for example, if you apply to licence at public university, you can apply to at most 10 programs. And then the matching mechanism is college proposing DA, which is in a dynamic way implemented. So when you submit your list of programs, you don't have to submit a rank order list, but you only submit a list of 10 programs. And then later on, you receive offers from the universities in real time. And then you can always decide whether you accept the offer and wait for later offers, or whether you reject the offer. So this is, but this is actually something that we don't want, that we don't focus on in this paper. So I don't want to go too much into detail here. So the timeline in principle is that between January 20 and March 11, you can submit your applications, but by March 11, you have to finalize your application list. And then from May 27, the admission phase starts, and then it goes on for almost 2 months, where you then can continuously receive offers and decide to accept or decline, which is very interesting in itself. But we will actually focus mainly on this point, to which universities you apply.
You said that you are not using this information, what colleges accepted the applicants, right? But there, in that procedure, in that decision process, I think the confidence or overconfidence may also be revealed. And if you are missing that information, I think you miss one important point for yourself.
Yeah, so we actually also had conjectures that it could be that, for example, more confident students, that they stay longer in the mechanism because they are more confident that they will receive an offer later on. We report these results because we also pre-registered them, but there was really nothing there. So we mainly find the effect of confidence on this application stage. But this also then transmits in the end to the final match that students get, but that I will also show you later on. So we will look at outcomes here where students apply, but we also look at where they end up in the end. But it doesn't seem to be that, for example, confident students, that they end up at better universities because they stay longer in the mechanism. Their behavior in the mechanism does not seem to be different.
I'm not sure if the students apply for less than 10 places, because it seems that to make adding one additional place to your list, that is a very great improvement.
Yeah, so that's actually, so we have this is from the administrative database, the fraction of like the length of the list that students are submitting. And we see that actually for many students, this 10 program limit is binding, but there are also many programs that, or many students who actually apply to fewer programs than 10. And then there are some programs, yeah, so as I already mentioned, there are some exceptions where, like in some programs, when you apply to a particular program, then you can also do sub-wishes, for example, different specializations and so on. So that's why there are also some more 10. But it seems to be that this 10 limit or 10 program limit seems to be a focal point for many students.
Finding your way back. I thought to follow up on the previous question, but you can still see if somebody is grabbing the first offer, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So in that sense, that might signal that the person was underconfident, right?
Yes. So we also pre-registered this, like the first offer acceptance, well, the likelihood to accept the first offer that you got, whether this is affected by confidence, but we also did not find anything there. So yeah, so we don't really find evidence that underconfidence or overconfidence actually seems to play a role for behavior in the mechanism, but it's a good point. Okay, so what's interesting to note here is that in France, they also have a centralized exam that's contributing to the overall grade in the end. But the centralized exams, the normal times, it only takes place in June, while you have to decide on the programs that you apply to already in March. So that means that students apply based on their the grades that they receive from their teachers during like the first 1.5 years of baccalaureate, and then the outcome of the centralized exams only. So you still have to pass it to be able to enroll in programs, but it's actually not taken into account for the priorities that universities set. And actually, important to note here is that in the year that we are studying in 2021, the centralized exam was cancelled due to COVID. So actually, the entire high school diploma grade is based on the teacher-given grades. And this is important because it refers to the information that students actually have on their relative rank in the distribution. Because in our context, it's only based on the teacher-given grades. In the absence of a college entrance exam, there's actually no way for students to look up how they actually rank in the distribution. And there's a lot of scope for under and overconfidence when you make this extrapolation from your within class rank to the national rank, which then matters for how good your admission chances are. In terms of college admission criteria, it's also that in France, it's relatively intransparent. So given that there's no centralized exam score that admission is based on, students have relatively little, well, there's basically no way how you can calculate how good your admission chances are in each programs, because programs are free to decide the admission criteria. So they can use the GPA, or they can, for example, overweigh the math grade or something like this. And this is only relatively intransparently mentioned on the matching platform. So students would most likely use their GPA as a proxy for their admission chances. And this is actually also rightfully so, because there was a report that we're here referring to from the Federal Court of Auditors in France. And they had information on all the priorities that universities have and all the information from the students. And they found that the simple GPA actually proxies admission chances pretty well at most programs.
Does lack of transparency mean that the universities can weigh the known information in any way they want? Or does it mean that they can consider things that are not their grades, such as their gender or race or something like that?
Yeah, so I think there are some criteria that they are not allowed to take into account. I guess like gender would be something that they are not allowed to take into account. I think also the high school that you went to should not be relevant, but it's unclear whether they use it or not. So there's a lot of discussion that whether there's like some discrimination or positive discrimination of very good high schools in Paris, for example. And yeah, so that's like something that we also cannot really check in the data because the data is not granular. But we claim that in this context, where there's relatively intransparent admission chances, then there's perhaps more room for belief on the rank to affect your belief on your admission chance. But we will, so I will, in the end, I can give some discussion on where we expect our treatment to have a larger or a weaker impact, depending on the institutional environment. Okay, so now I will come to the data that we're using. So we ran a survey with more than 2,000 participants of Parcoursup in 2021, who are in their final year of their Bac General, so the general high school tracks, general high school track. So yeah, of course, it's difficult to sample these individuals. They're like 17, 18 years old. So where do you find them? So of course on social media. And what we did is that we bought ads on Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook, where we advertised our survey and basically invited them to participate. And participation was incentivized with the possibility to win Amazon gift cards, both for participation and also for some incentivized questions. Then in the end, we match the survey data to the administrative data. So we know that the students, they are real students in the end. And we have our outcomes, our main outcomes are all based on the administrative data. Within the survey, we measure the level of self-confidence. And within the survey, we also provide our pre-registered confidence correcting treatment. And we conducted the survey just before the end of the application phase, so just before they had to finalize their application list. So then we match it to the administrative data where we have information on their applications and their actual college admission.
When did the students know about the aim of the survey?
Sorry?
When did the student know about the aim of the survey?
Yes, so you mean the aim in terms of
for example, that they had some kind of beliefs about this correction of conceptions, and people applied for the survey if they are more eager to know their chances or whatever. So if that would be true, then you may overestimate the effect of giving personal level information.
No, so in the consent form, we mainly stated that we are interested in college application behavior and how people make decisions on where they apply to colleges. I think that was the statement that we used there. So it was relatively general. We didn't to say what our main hypothesis is. And I will also show the balance table later on. So at least on observables, it doesn't seem to be the case that we will have a very selected sample here. But first, like the survey flow that we have, at first we ask some demographic information, which is also then used to match the students. Then we asked for their application list. So they were asked to write down the programs where they are, their most preferred programs where they want to apply for on Hakusud. And we also asked them what they think, how likely it is that they receive an offer from these programs in percent. And then we measure confidence by asking them what is their guessed rank in the GPA distribution. And then we have the treatment where in the control condition there's no feedback, and in the confidence feedback they receive information on where they rank in comparison to like the reference sample of bac general students. And then in the end we ask them to bet on the outcome where they think they will end up.
So we do not manage to get all the parents school payment.
The parents, so we do that. We do have that in the administrative data. So we know. So we subsume this as socioeconomic status, but this is actually based on the occupation of the parent. So in France, there's like an established categorization, and for example, like so whether the parents are, for example, high-skilled employees or low-skilled employees, and this is captured in the admin data, and based on that we construct our measure of low socioeconomic status. So if both parents are from rather low paid and low educated background, then the student is classified as from low socioeconomic status. If at least one of them is from high socioeconomic background, then they are classified as high socioeconomic status. So this is the balance of our service. So here we have the administrative data. These are only students who are in bac general and who are doing their bac in 2021. So in the year that we are also studying. I mean, there are also some students, for example, who are changing subjects, who are taking part like a second time or do a gap year. That's why this number is lower than the 900,000 that I presented before. And this is our total sample from the main survey. And we see that this is actually relatively well balanced across these dimensions. So we have some more females in the survey and some more students that are classified as low socioeconomic status. Here we compare control and feedback group. And this is also what these p-values are referring to. Also here the balance seems to be quite good, I would say. And then we have some more highest honors. So bac grades are in France given in 4 categories, and the highest honor students are the best students. We have some more in the control treatment, but we will control for that in all the regressions. So
what about the GPA of the administrative data?
Yeah, so in the administrative data, we only observe their baccalaureate grade in these 4 categories. So we don't have like very detailed data on the GPA. So that's why we have the GPA that's only the self-reported one. And yeah.
So may I ask how you set up the admin data? Because first you mentioned that around 900,000 students are applying, but you reach.
So like so here we only keep the ones who are in bac general in the general high school track, and only the ones that have also done their bac in 2021. But in the administrative data, there are also like many students that did their bac already in 2020 or 2019, who did a gap year, for example, or studied something first and then decided to change studies. So that's why the number of total participants is higher than the number.
So you don't focus just on the university programs, but you also is preparatory.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So here we only select based on the high school track. So only bac general students, but not based on the outcome. Okay, so first I will show some descriptive results from the administrative data to show that apparently gender and socioeconomic status seems to matter here for the for applications.
So can you explain what the feedback was?
So the feedback is then we tell them where they actually are.
Treatment is basically one sentence.
So that I will show you later on how this exactly looks like. So at first some descriptive results. So we measure the prestige of a program here, very simple, as just the average bug grade of the students that are in the end attending a program. And here, what I plot here is basically the characteristics of an application list, or the average application list by baccalaureate grade and by gender. And what we see here is the minimum prestige of an application list. So this is the prestige of the so-called SAFE program. So this is like the lowest prestigious or the least prestigious program in an application list, and this is the most prestigious program. So this is kind of the REACH program. We find that differences are relatively small in terms of the SAFE programs. High achieving females include somewhat safer choices, so less prestigious programs, but the difference is small. But we see relatively large differences in terms of the REACH choice. So here, in particular, female students with the best grades, they apply to less prestigious REACH programs, top programs.
What's the difference between GPA and honors?
For
example, what's the difference between high and highest honors or no honors?
So this is basically based on the GPA that you obtained in the 5 terms, and if your GPA is from 10 to 12, then you are in this category, no honors. This is like 30% of students. I can show you. So this is actually, so if you're 10 to 12, then it's like 35% of students, they receive no honors, 30% of students receive honors, and the best students, they have a GPA from 16 to 20, these are 13%, they are the best students. So this is like the classical categorization. In France, I can already show you when I'm here at this point, so that this is our self-reported GPA that we elicit in the survey, and this is what we observed in the administrative data, and you see that it's actually, so the self-reported data makes sense, so it's actually very much correlated to what we observe in the admin data.
Do you have data on the failure?
How many people fail the bug?
Yes, at this stage.
So we so I think we have that. So so that's something you would suggest to check, maybe, like, to see if they are.
That would somehow.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, so here was where I stopped. So we find that female students, they apply to less prestigious REACH programs, and we find a similar difference by socioeconomic status. Also here, it is in particular the high achieving low SES students, they include safer choices, so less prestigious safe choices, but difference is small. But in terms of REACH programs, there's a large difference. So there are students from low socioeconomic status apply less ambitiously. And this actually also translates into the final match. So one could say maybe applications, then it depends on where, but it could be that it's like males, they are just overconfident, they apply, but then they don't get into prestigious programs. But we also find that it's actually, if you don't apply, then this also translates into your admissions. You also here we find gaps by gender and socioeconomic status. But of course, this could have like a number of reasons. So it could be preferences over programs, could be preferences over peers, for example. But it could also be confidence. But we cannot say this from this graph. So that's why we ran the survey in which we measure self-confidence. And the way we measure it is that we ask students to guess their GPA rank relative to a reference sample of students who are in Bac General and also taking part in Bac. So we ask them, what was your, first we ask them the self-reported GPA, and then they can indicate on a slider where they think they rank from 0 to 100. Yeah.
So what you said now just puzzled me a little bit. So basically, if top ranked female students apply to some universities, since the university's evaluation is or their positioning in your rank is based on the GPAs of the applicants. I mean, they obviously pull up the ranking of these universities. So the fact that those are low indicate that perhaps male students who apply there are typically lower. Have lower grades, right? Mm-hmm. So is it possible that this is down to some gender-based preferences over some schools or some professions even or something like this?
Yeah, so like
so let me just give you one example. So in Hungary, I think teacher training is not very popular nowadays, but even classically, it's very much a female-dominated profession. And usually high-flyer male applicants would not apply there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is like it's probably only a safe choice, if anything, for male applicants, mm-hmm. Which might drag down the average GPA of a teacher training college, even if the female applicants are typically not inferior to mm-hmm. that average.
So, like in terms of this figure, it would mean that, so here you would expect, for example, that males, so
it's a bit difficult because I'm talking about specific schools and here you're talking about averages.
Exactly, yeah. So we also cross-check our prestige measure and whether it actually makes sense. And we look in the paper, we also like report like the top 20 programs in terms of prestige, and it is actually like the programs that you would also expect there. So it's like the very prestigious class préparatoires in Paris, for example, they are really the ones who are attracting the top students here. So we considered like another selectivity measure, which would be like the number of applications over the number of seats. So this is also like a way how we could measure selectivity, but there we usually so it's very much correlated with prestige, but in particular at the top of the distribution, that doesn't perform really well because then you have, for example, arts and design classes where many people apply, classes that are pretty small, and then they have very high selectivity, but then these classes are not really attended by the best students. So the GPA of the students that are in the end applying there, it's actually not that high. So in that sense, so that would be maybe like a selectivity measure that you would be more in favor of, but it's actually, so it seems that it's actually not performing very well to distinguish prestige of the programs here in our case. But
I mean, it's a little bit beyond or outside your paper, but I think what one can check is if at the university, from the university side, you observe big differences between the scores of female and male applicants.
Yeah.
For certain
universities.
So I just have stereotypical images. So one of them is teacher training, but on the other hand, male-dominated professions like engineering typically attracts the highest scoring female students as well.
Yeah.
So there you do not have this bias against the male applicants.
Yeah. That's an interesting suggestion. I will have to think about it now.
There's a question from the audience, actually on my asking. Could you look at the gap in the probability of applying for STEM courses?
Yes, of course, yeah. So we do something similar where we look at class préparatoire, which is, I mean, it's not really STEM, so STEM is that, but yeah, it's true. So we don't do it for now because we wanted to be a bit agnostic about like what the program is about, but we wanted to more like look at this prestige kind of like where the good students are actually going to. Probably I should speed up a bit. So yeah, so we asked them like this rank about where they stand in the GPA distribution, and then this is also incentivized. So if they are within ±3 ranks, they can take part in a raffle of 10 €100 gift cards. Okay, so what do we find here? So here I plot the actual GPA rank compared to the reference sample, and here's the guessed GPA rank, and find like this, this typical pattern that students who are in the bottom half of the distribution, they tend to be overconfident. Students in the top half tend to be underconfident, but this of course could also be like purely mechanical, it could be like just mean reversion. So what we are mainly interested in is actually the difference between males and females. And here we see that in the bottom half, there are no really systematic differences between males and females, but especially in the top, it's female students who are systematically less confident about their rank. And we find a similar pattern for high and low SES. So also here, it's particularly in the top of the distribution where we find differences. So as I already said, but in the administrative data, we only have this in these 4 categories, but we can also plot this figure by the categories from the admin data. And this also like confirms what I've just said. So particularly among the highest honor students, we find the like a gender gap in confidence in where they think they are in the distribution. And the same is true also for by social economic status. So I will skip the regressions because it's just like confirming what we saw in the figures already. And now the question is, but do differences in self-confidence actually matter for college applications? So what we do here now is that we look at different outcomes from the administrative data. So we look at the maximum prestige. This is like what I already introduced before, like kind of the prestige of the REACH program, the prestige of the SAFE program. We can look at the mean prestige of your application list, and we include a dummy for whether you are applying to at least one of these elite school tracks of the class preparatoires. And we also look at to which university or which college you actually matched. We look at the prestige of the final match and whether you are matched to an elite school, a class preparatoire. And how we do this is that so here we regress like all of these outcomes on misconfidence, which is the guessed rank minus the true rank. So this variable is positive if you're overconfident, it's negative if you are underconfident, and we control for the true rank. So in principle, if students would just apply based on their academic credentials, then misconfidence should actually not play a role for applications. But what we find that it does actually play a big role. So for the maximum prestige, misconfidence is actually strongly positively correlated with max prestige. For the minimum prestige, the coefficient is basically 0 almost, which suggests that confidence is not really costly. So if you are overconfident, you do not apply to super prestigious programs as your safe programs. So that means there's confidence does not seem to increase your risk of remaining unassigned. It also increases the mean prestige of the application list, and it also increases the likelihood to match to a class to apply to a class preparatoire, and also to be matched to a class preparatoire. And in the end, in terms of final match, it also increases the prestige of the final match. And we can also split this by those who are underconfident and those who are overconfident. And it seems to be that it's both driven by underconfidence and overconfidence, actually. The applications to elite tracks here, underconfidence seems to play a bigger role, which also makes sense because these are particularly the very good students who are underconfident. Okay, so now the question is whether our confidence correcting treatment. So now I've only looked at the control group, of course, so I didn't include the treatment group here. So these were only students who did not get any feedback on their rank and the GPA distribution. But now to a randomized subsample of in the treatment group, we provided information on their true rank. So here's someone who thought that she is like on rank 95, but is in fact on rank 98. And since this is within plus minus 3 ranks, she gets this green signal that she's 3 ranks too pessimistic. If you're between 3 and 10 ranks incorrect, you get this yellow signal that you are here 10 ranks too pessimistic. And if you're more than 10 ranks incorrect, you get this red signal here that you are 25 points too pessimistic. So now we can see whether our treatment actually has an impact on the relevance of misconfidence. So here the misconfidence variable is like only replicating the results from before from the control group. So the impact of misconfidence in the control group. But what is interesting here is now that our rank feedback reduces the impact of misconfidence in many dimensions. So first of all, it reduces the impact of misconfidence on the most prestigious program. Also, there's a negative impact on the mean prestige, so on the average prestige of the program. Also, somewhat reduces the impact on applying to class préparatoire, but like not quite significantly so. But there's a similar coefficient on the likelihood to be matched to a class préparatoire, which is significant here. So in the end, if we focus on the treatment group, so if we just like look at the treatment group and look at whether misconfidence still predicts college applications, we see that it's actually not the case. Now college applications are only predicted by the true rank and by the academic credentials, but misconfidence does not predict something on top of that.
Is it possible that you actually only find this effect because you didn't have any centralized exams? And basically you reported there are 2 chances of getting into the universities by saying that you're at 23rd percentile, so you have absolutely every chance to get into the top university. While A, if you had a centralized exam, it wouldn't be the case. B, in general, they might have reported, so when they were over or underconfident, they actually knew their true abilities. It's only that GPA doesn't measure the true abilities. The GPA measures something else, how clean they dress, because teachers like that, or anything else. And in every other case, when there is a centralized exam, that wouldn't be the case. B, in other countries where there is no centralized exam, like in Germany, or which we actually did that, whatever. GPA is given a different way than it is given in France, because it was a unique situation.
Unique situation because
this was the only time when there were you didn't have a centralized exam. So GPA didn't make at least GPA is not so this was a unique year when GPA actually made all the difference. And in every other case, it makes a difference, but not this much.
But like one response at this point, it was not known that the centralized exams will not take place. So that was like, so I think it was decided relatively spontaneously that they cannot do it because numbers are too high. But what I definitely agree with that in a system with where there's a centralized exam, then I would also expect that our results would not be like the same way that they are now. So kind of what we are also suggesting in the conclusion is that it's actually important to give students information, for example, like based on a college entrance exam. So because this reduces a lot of the uncertainty that students here facing, and when they kind of these biases could come into play. So I would also suspect that here, I think here in Hungary, you have a centralized exam, right? So I think here our treatment would probably not have right, but there are many countries that actually, Germany, as you mentioned, they also don't have a centralized exam, and then it's always hard to make this inference from your within class rank to how good you actually are in the population, because you take into account how good your school is, and I don't know. Yes, so yeah, no, but it's yeah, but it's a very good point. So something I wanted to.
Yeah, in my mind, so I'm always very skeptical about these very short and easy treatments and their effect. I don't believe that, just telling people something that will change their life. So much more process. So in this case, I think, as I said, it works because you don't have the absolute probability of getting into university, because this is the only thing that matters.
I mean, it's still not perfect information. So because like, even if you know that you are in the top 20%, you don't know if you will get into like a very prestigious program, for example. So because there's no clear mapping of your GPA into admission chances, but but it seems to be information that matters. And it's
But your effect is actually on the top. If you tell somebody that you are the 93rd percentile, basically you're telling them that you can apply anywhere.
Exactly. And this is actually also what we are, what I'm coming to now. So because then we also want to look at what actually does this to this gender and social gap, because this is where we found the largest gaps in confidence. When we looked at like kind of how confidence compares between gender and low and high socioeconomic status. So now we look at only the très bien students, so the ones who are like the highest category of grades among students, and we actually find, I mean, so these effects are very large, but of course they should be taken with a grain of salt. So that, because here now we only focus like on this top 13% of students, but we find that actually here our treatment reduces the gender gap, which is on top here. So here is the gender gap, so in maximum prestige, and then also attendance to class préparatoire, there's a large gap, which we also find in the administrative data. And we find that our treatment actually reduces the gender gap among these top students by to a large degree, by 67%. But of course, like the standard errors, if you compute like so how this would play out like in the population, I guess like the standard errors are pretty high. So I mean, it's not like I wouldn't claim that this is like the whole solution to the gender gap problem.
Sorry if I missed it, but I don't remember that you showed the distribution of misconfidence. Maybe how many people are underconfident and how much they are underconfident, and how many people are overconfident and how much. And when you show the control group, then it seems that misconfidence is a positive effect on the maximum prestige. So I guess the most of the people are overconfident. Is it true? Yes. Or does another confidence has a different impact? Or just the last question that when I look at these figures based on this what I said before, I would guess that males are overconfident and women are less biased or more precise.
So that's what I've shown, that especially at the top of the distribution, males are less underconfident than females are. So also males are on average underconfident among like the very best graders, but males are more confident than females are. So
I would suggest to show a figure where in the control that is confidence, but the effect of overconfidence and the effect of underconfidence separately.
Yes, yeah.
And interact a little bit between each gender.
By gender, I don't have it. So I have the figure separately by under and overconfidence. And there we find that like especially these elite track applications to class préparatoire, they are mainly driven by the underconfident students. so that they are more likely, when they get the feedback, that they're more likely to apply to class préparatoire.
That's great. That's very interesting.
So I have that in the paper. I think I don't. So probably I don't find it now. Maybe I should wrap up.
We have
Yes,
a couple of minutes, but you should start wrapping up. Like
Yeah,
10
okay,
more- 10
yes,
minutes
yeah.
max.
Okay, I'll do that. And yeah, so actually for low SES students, we also find that it reduces the gap among the highest socioeconomic status students by to quite a large degree, especially for these elite track applications. But yeah, so one has to take this with a grain of salt, because now we are going into like small samples here, because there are not so many students from low socioeconomic status that actually are in this highest honors category, but those who are treated seem to apply more ambitiously after receiving the treatment. So by now, we also have something on the mechanism. So the kind of what coming back to your point, that so the mechanism that we claim here is that because people get information on confidence, they have better information on their offer beliefs from the program. And we can present 3 pieces of evidence that this plays a role. So one is actually the stated offer beliefs from, so here we focus on class préparatoire and top 10% prestige programs, because they are approximately similar in terms of selectivity. We can also construct a variable called optimism, where we confront their belief that they state with the actual, so whether they actually received an offer, and this is between +1 and -1. So +1 is if you had thought you have 100% chance to get an offer from all the programs, but you received no offer. -1 is if you had like 0% belief that you will receive an offer, but you receive offer from all programs. So that's how we construct this variable. And then ultimately the guessed match. So we also ask them where they think they will end, where they will end up, and then they can also take part in a raffle if they win. And we find that this misconfidence variable actually affects the belief, offer beliefs for those programs, for those students who list one of these programs in their list. And there's also an impact on class préparatoire, but it's not significant because we are here at a very reduced sample. Misconfidence also seems to predict this over-optimism, where we confront offer beliefs with realized offers. And it also affects the prestige of the bet. But we find that when we provide feedback, then the impact of misconfidence on the prestige of the bet is actually reduced. So that's so that's actually going back to the point mentioned earlier, that we seem to provide information on, so that subjects can form more precise beliefs about their offer probability. But as we said, or as we said before, that in states with nationwide exams, as for example here, or with nationwide examinations, as in Hungary, we would expect a much smaller effect of our intervention. But still, there are many countries that have a system like this. So we would suspect that giving information is actually important. So then I come to the conclusion. So we find large gender and SES gaps in self-confidence, particularly among high achievers. And we find that this confidence predicts college applications, but that our intervention can correct self-confidence and then also reduces the relevance of misconfidence. So the implications here are that we find, so this is like a cheap and scalable, easy to implement policy of provision of relative rank. So so now the next thing that we want to do is maybe to suggest something like this to the ministry, maybe not to the low achieving students, but at least to the high achieving students, to tell them how good they actually are, because this could, in principle, for example, for female students who tend to be underconfident and low SES students, it could maybe make them apply more ambitiously, which can have also positive effects on the stability of the final match. Okay, that was it. What I have for now.
Thank you. I suggest we do the questions or sandwiches because there are some.
That's very interesting to hear what you have to say. Yeah.